All right, hi everyone. I'm literally sitting on the river bank right now, and yeah, it's really hot. I'm thirsty, but we'll see what we can do. So recently, I've gone on antidepressants and Xanax, Prozac, and Xanax, and my psychiatrist said you have to get off the Xanax at some point because it's addictive. But so far, I've been able to sleep better, and maybe I'm a little bit less stressed, but that's it. Apparently, you have to wait for the SSRIs to kick in, so we'll see about that. Still extremely nervous, but there are a variety of things I want to talk about, such as I have, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out that I could split the screen, so I have a bunch of notes written up and I put them on the screen. So I'm recording myself and I can read the notes at the same time, which is pretty neat. So I wrote, if antidepressants are the solution, why are there more depressed people than ever? Privatization of stress. And then I include a quote from uh, Mark Fisher. It goes without saying that all mental illnesses are neurologically instantiated, but this says nothing about their causation. If it is true, for instance, that depression is constituted by low serotonin levels, what still needs to be explained is why particular individuals have low levels of serotonin. From Capitalist Realism, page 37. So this just goes back to my old argument about pessimism versus optimism. That, we are told that things are getting better, and yet nobody seems to feel that way. And, there seems to be a kind of paradox or a contradiction that it might be that the percentage of people who are suffering terrible things has decreased, but the quantity has increased, right? So, if half the people 1,000 years ago, were murdered, and that's how they died, that's how people would die. Now only it's 10%, but there's a lot more people now than there were 1,000 years ago. So if the percentage has decreased, that pretty much means the quantity has increased, right? So it's just a matter of how you set down your numbers. And so yeah, I mean, if these SSRIs that I'm on, Prozac, if it might end up working, what still needs to be explained is why do so many people need SSRIs in the first place, even if it works. And I'm not skeptical. Maybe it does work, maybe it doesn't. Probably it's either or. For some people it does, or it's not either or. For some people it does, for other people it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, you might be suspicious that, all right, if these things are the solution, why the fuck are there more depressed people than ever before, right? And maybe the answer to that is not enough people are taking them. And I guess that's that one answer, but it still doesn't answer the underlying problem. which is that why do we need them in the first place, right? Genetic determinism is false, in my opinion. I think the environment has everything to do with how fucked up you are. And even my psychiatrist said so. Uh, she said, school fucked you up, the school system fucked you up. And I agreed. So it might be that, my kind of terrible anxiety and depression are neurologically instantiated. They are still caused by the environment around me. If all day I could somehow be doing happy activities, I would not need SSRIs. But you get fucked up, right? I mean, how many people who are on SSRIs can you name who are not fucked up in some kind of way by the environment, right? Um, Everybody who takes SSRIs were fucked up by the environment at some point. And so people who don't take SSRIs or don't need to were probably not fucked up by the environment. Otherwise, they would have to. So the environment always ends up being the final culprit. And so the genetic determinism fails to explain the relationship between the chemical and the biological, the biochemical basis and the environment, right? So you might look at a tree like this one and explain all its genetic properties. It's made out of roots and crown, leaves. What it does, it creates photosynthesis. It sucks up precipitation from the soil, water from the soil to drink, and so on and so on. You can explain how big it is and how tall and how thick it is. You can separate it into classes, like it might be an oak tree, it might be an evergreen or a deciduous tree. It might have pines or it might have flowers, and so on, whatever. And then you can also do the same with a lumberjack and his axe. And you can say, well, it's made up of steel and the guy is made up of carbon and whatever else the human is made out of, a bunch of shit. Calcium and so on. Calcium, liver, heart, blah, blah, blah. But what you cannot do by explaining the genetics is how, the axe of the lumberjack meets the oak tree, right? There's nothing in the genes of the tree that says it has to be split by an axe. And likewise, there's nothing in the lumberjack or in his axe that says it has to split the tree. Those are extra genetic. There's an extra genetic relationship, which is what we call the environment. The environment is the emergent property of genetic factors, and it retroactively causes the genes to change, right? So there's this question of, race and IQ, which really pisses me off. And you might say, well, black people on average have a lower IQ, a lower intelligence quotient. But that's not enough to explain why. You have to look at the environment. And you will never be able to prove that their IQ has a limit, a definitive limit. that has to be lower than that of white people, let's say, or Asians or Jews, because the environment is not done supervening on the genetics. It's always in flux. It always changes. So we may well end up with similar levels of IQ or even higher, depending on the environment, right? So yeah, and it really takes a lot of mental gymnastics to look at the history of black people in the U.S., to be enslaved for hundreds of years, to be destroyed for hundreds of years, deprived of every opportunity, not even giving them free food, right? I mean, last time I heard, when there's a bill the Democrats put up to provide free meals to poor children, the Republicans shoot it down. They even went as far as shooting down free baby formulas for babies, right? And so then you wonder why their IQ is lower. I wonder why the crime rate is so higher. It's not for nothing. That's the most obvious explanation. And so there's a ship. Don't know if this is gonna be loud, but anyway. So the point is that there's always a retroactive factor. The environment shoves itself back into the genetics, and so you really shouldn't be able to be a determinist, a genetic determinist. So on that basis, you can reject things like scientific racism and realism, because it might be that race is a real thing in some sense, but it's so contingent it basically doesn't mean anything, right? So let's look at the other notes I have. Pretty sure this thing is gonna be loud, but maybe we'll persevere. Maybe we'll persevere anyway. Well, I'll just show you. It's almost here. Let's just look at it. Very nice place. So I have some more notes here to look at. It's gonna be waves. Ooh, look. That looks nice. Anyway, let's look at the other notes I have. J.D. Vance's speech. Greatest country in the world with many of the shittiest people. The worst people in the US are not immigrants. They are the ones who stormed the Capitol. When a white guy does capitalism, it's okay. So what does all that crap mean? I was listening to J.D. Vance's speech, who is the Republican nominee for VP nominee, and he was giving this speech. This is all you really need to know about them, right? That he was giving this speech about he had a grandmother who would keep guns everywhere in the house. She would be keeping guns, right? And it got a huge uproar from the crowd, from the Republicans, huge uproarious, elation. Then later on, he mentioned that he has an Asian wife. Nothing. Dust devil, crickets, radio silence. And that, he was proud of having an Asian wife. No reaction whatsoever, right? So I think that tells you everything you need to know about the Republicans, basically. They love guns, they love murderous cruelty, but they hate everyone else, right? They're just not good people. I mean, that's all you really need to know. To me, I don't need to look at the legislation or any of the deep facts. I'm the sort of analyst who just looks at little things that happen, and that's enough for me, which I think is a pretty wise move, right? I think ad hominem plus induction makes a good argument. You can look at a person's character and you can induce logically what they stand for and what kind of what their arguments might be. You don't even need to look at it. So I think there's something to the ad hominem. It can be used as a logical tool. The greatest country in the world with many of the shittiest people. Yes, I mean, it's like George Carlin said, they had this amazing opportunity, this beautiful, huge country, and they sort of turned it into a giant mole. 50 states that are supposed to be united but are not united. And, they love their state rights, right? I'm like, what's the point of having a country if you're not going to unify the country? I just don't get it. I mean, the people that live in the US, they have unparalleled privilege, but they haven't really earned it, right? And it sort of tells you what happens when people get too much privilege. They're not grateful for anything. They're too greedy and entitled, right? That's what happens when you give people too many rights. Yeah, and it seems to me the worst people in the US are not the immigrants. They are the evil religious fundamentalists, people who storm the Capitol, who deny election results, who believe insane conspiracies, much more dangerous than immigrants, right? When a white guy does capitalism, it's okay. So that's in reference to there are lots of white people who are rich, but then there's no conspiracies against them, right? It's always Jews that are supposed to be the bad guys, right? And it's like everything a Jew might do, a white guy also does, right? So I guess there's just a simple point against anti-Semitism, that why is it when Donald Trump is a mega billionaire or when Elon Musk is a mega billionaire, nobody gives a fuck, right? But when it's some Jew, oh God, it's terrible, History can regress. US example. The word genocide was coined in the 20th century. Japan. Most of humanity's greatest moments may be behind it. Best comedians are either dead or past their prime. So yeah, it's the history can regress, I think, is just it's just an argument against optimism that Alright, sorry. Yesterday when I was here, I ran out of liquid and it was really hot and I was tired, so I had to leave. I nearly got a heat stroke by the time I got home. So now we're here again. Same location. I always struggle to find the location because where I live there's a lot of green stuff, meadows and forests and shit, but some places are too rowdy and you sort of want to get away from people but still find a place that you can actually sit down. So I'm never gonna get used to that. Anyway, I have a bunch of notes. I pulled them up here again, but I feel like it's pointless. Maybe we'll look at it, but the more I think, the more I just keep returning to antinatalism and futility and things like that, those sorts of subjects. Because it just seems to me that some people just get really unlucky, other people get lucky, and there's no justice to it. And if you ask me, like why I am an antinatalist, I would say just because of the principle that life is really unfair. And I'm a pretty sick person in many ways, physically, mentally. I'm pretty fucked. And so all you really hear when you're fucked up in this kind of way is tough luck. There's nothing I can do about it, right? You go to a doctor or you talk to your parent or a friend, and eventually all they can say is, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't know what to say to that. I can't help. It is the way it is. That's life. Everybody gets their fair. Everybody gets, the fair share. Those are the answers that you get as you grow older and sicker. Increasingly, we just can't fix it. And I've been unfortunate enough to hear that stuff pretty early on. We just can't fix it. We can't help it. Or in some cases they can, but it's never gonna be good enough, right? Like for example, right now I'm on Xanax. And I know I was pronouncing it bad. I was pronouncing it Xanax, but it's Xanax. Which doesn't make any sense. It should be an X. But that's English for you. And the paradox I've noticed is that it makes you really drowsy. So you don't have much energy. But if you drink an energy drink, then you might have energy, but it cancels out the anti-anxiety qualities of the Xanax. So you either have to pick. You're either gonna be drowsy or you're gonna be energetic. And that's what I've noticed. I don't think there's a way out of that. I should be off Xanax at some point and only be on Prozac. I mean, maybe that will do something. But it seems to me there's a paradox. Like at some point I drank a lot of Coke and energy drinks and I couldn't sleep, but I was really energetic. I had more energy. If you look at the videos I made in the winter time when I was wearing a jacket, it was a lot more energetic than later on. That's because later on I no longer was drinking so much Coke and energy drinks because I couldn't sleep. And I realized one reason for my insomnia was because I was drinking so much Coke and energy drink. The reason I was doing that is because I wanted to lose weight. And you have, diet versions of those and they taste good. And it's very difficult to find diet versions of iced tea or something, you know, which I really like. So there are all these paradoxes that, something for something. The more you live, the more you notice these, right? If you study much and you become really smart and knowledgeable, you're not gonna be out there fucking and partying. Um, you can go on and on and on. You can't have it all. And that's not a trivial thing, I think. It's really painful that you have to make all these fucking decisions that hurt. And there's nothing you can do about it. You know? Nothing. I was trying to adjust my glasses, but I took them off. And I can hardly see. Everything is much more blurry, but I like it a lot better. I don't like my glasses at all. That's another shitty thing. I fucked up my eyesight. Because I wasn't wearing glasses for years when I should have. Also, don't listen to music too loud, because you will damage your hearing. I probably have done that too. I didn't brush my teeth for years. I got like 15 fills or whatever the fuck they're called. I got fat. I'm about 296 right now. That's the only one I can fix right now. I can lose some weight. But anyway, so the point is that it's all just really difficult. It's all based on luck, right? You have people who are really lucky. They're really energetic and don't have depression and they're really confident. And then you have people like us, me, you, maybe, who are virtually nutcases and we don't have any confidence and we don't have the get up and go, all that kind of jazz. And that's only because of some genetic and environmental bullshit. There's no justice to it. And the more I live, the more I think about this stuff, the more it pisses me off that A, everything is unjust, that it's just a matter of where you're born, and B, that when something goes wrong, all people can offer is, especially people who defend life, right, who are not anti-natalists, or who tell you not to die, your parents, let's say, all they can say is, well, tough luck, tough luck, tough luck. It is what it is, nothing I can do. That's a really fucked up thing to say to somebody, in my opinion, even if it's true. Right? It's just fucked up. But that's the way it works. So I don't know, that's the feeling I keep having. It's that, it's just unbearable. The unfairness of it, I feel. The sadness I feel towards my fellow creatures. Like, I don't feel sorry for myself, despite what it seems. I only feel sorry for other people, usually. Even if they're much happier than me. I am somehow incapable of feeling sorry for myself, because I think I deserve it somehow. But I feel sorry for everyone else. Yesterday I was in a car and I was looking at one little entertainment I created for myself was to look at people in other cars driving. And it just made me think, well, you're not all bad people, right? They just seemed normal. They were going about their business. They were wearing sunglasses because the sun was shining in their face. And what I thought was, I couldn't wear sunglasses, I looked stupid. But, you know, it sort of makes you think. Isolated, most of these people are not bad. But when it comes to doing something, the structures that surround them, the ideas in their heads, the groups, life screws them up. But individually, in these little moments, they're fine. The little moments of happiness, tenderness, that no one should overlook. I think we have something else. Yeah, I mean, I talked about history yesterday, genetic determinism, why I think it's false. All these paradoxes that piss me off. Right? Even something like, it doesn't even matter what you think. Sorry, some update bullshit cut me off, so I just restate what I said. It doesn't even matter what you think about somebody like Trump. You can pick any asshole that you don't like. The point is, isn't it so disappointing that, the human species couldn't do better than that? Right? That we couldn't do better than some guy, take your pick, who is obviously a liar and a cheater. Perfectly obvious. I mean, it's just listen to him talk for 5 seconds and it's like, well, I think God saved my life, and China, I think God saved my life, and so, and it's like, let's see if I can do a better one. Hold on. China, I think God saved my life. I can't do it. Anyway, fuck, that pisses me off. I wish I could do it. Kamala. Sleepy Joe. To tell you the truth, it was God who saved me. No, it wasn't. But, it's just such obvious bullshit. Even if you believe in God, the stuff he says is just so absurd and so stupid on its face that you couldn't possibly believe it. And yet apparently 70, 80 million people think it's the best. That's the best we can do on this planet. We just don't have any evidence that we can do better. So yeah, just yesterday, I hadn't seen it, but there was a school shooting in the US, in Georgia. And it was a 14-year-old boy who did it, apparently. And I saw that they were gonna trial him as an adult. Now, there's so many stupid things about this, right? Like, what's the point of having laws for kids and for adults if you're just gonna pretend he's an adult? That's the first thing I don't get. Because I've seen this several times. There's a mass shooter, he's underage or doing something bad. It's like, we're gonna trial him as an adult. It's like, well, first of all, he's not an adult, he's a kid. And, you think that's the solution? Just, it's not your fault that you don't have decent gun laws, decent mental health, all that kind of stuff. You're just gonna pretend it's that 14-year-old psychotic kid's fault. Yeah, we're gonna trial him, monster, blah blah blah. On to the next. Trial him as an adult. He's not an adult. Why should he be tried as an adult? Or tried? It doesn't make any sense. That's why I don't like the death penalty, because not because I like the killers, it's because, well, first of all, the state becomes a killer too. But also it's like, it's just a way to defer responsibility. It's like, this is a perfect example, right? It's not a fucked up gun culture. It's not a fucked up mental health issues in the US. I'm not American, but for you guys, it's the 14-year-old psychotic kid who did it, right? Well, in some sense he did. In some sense, you sort of put the gun in his hand and said, shoot, right? So that's the best the US can do. The US is really a shithole, I'm sorry to say. I really don't like the US, because it's such a shithole in so many ways that it can do so much better than it has, right? So much better than it has. And so, yeah. Another note I have here is something that I've rehashed many times. History can regress. US example. The US was much more liberal 10 years ago. There's a much more unified. The presidents are getting dumber and dumber. The word genocide was coined in the 20th century. That's an important one. I never made that point before, but I think it's really an important point. That's my point. I'm proud of it. That, if you really believe that there's some kind of linear progress in history, how comes it that the word genocide, which means the mass murder of a people, right? The mass destruction of a people, how comes it that it had to be introduced in the 20th century, right? I mean, the people who believe in progress are basically saying, well, the past 40, 50 years, things have been improving, so therefore they're gonna keep improving, right? It's like Emendam's stupid fucking argument about antinatalist guy, if you don't know. It's like, well, the population numbers are going down, so they're gonna keep going down. It's like, well, they could go down and be maintained at 500 million, no problem. But they might also keep shooting up. They might shoot up at some point. So, there are examples in the USSR, for example, where they banned abortion, they banned contraceptives. There was a huge explosion in population. Totalitarian countries can do that, right? And just like how in China you had the two-child policy, which meant you could have a maximum of 2 children. Now they could reverse that. Why not? What's the difference? You can reverse it. And you can say, okay, you gotta have 2 at minimum. So yeah, that's just an example that history is not linear, that it can regress. And so yeah, I guess that just ties back to antinatalism, that why the fuck would you have kids at this point in time? Beside the obvious fact that it's so fucking dangerous, why would you do it? There are bombs flying everywhere. The economy is total shit. Again, people are depressed. Climate change. Again, for me, I can tell you from personal experience, it's really fucking hot. It's so much harder than it was 10, 15 years ago. I'm old enough to know. Anyone who denies this has to be a fucking retard. Really. Right. It's bad. So, but even despite that, again, when you just think about it for 5 seconds, how many diseases are there in the world? A gazillion? Thousands? And they still do it. I mean, 59,000 people get rabies every year. Rabies. You die, probably, if you get rabies. 59,000. How many people die of cancer? What about if you're autistic and depressed and anxious? I mean, you basically have two choices, right? Either you're gonna be the psycho killer or you're gonna be the good guy, right? You're the good guy, you're fucked because you live in a shitty world. If you're the psycho killer, then that's bad too because you're a psycho killer, right? That's another point from Emendum, which I haven't mentioned him much in my videos, but he is a really, really intelligent man, despite his flaws. Tons and tons of great points. Like another that stuck out to me was when he said, like, you really only care about your own kids, right? Nepotism, right? That all the other kids are running around in the on the playground, and you only care about yours. The others could fall on their face, and maybe you would do something, but really, you're only looking out for your own kid, right? And you might say, well, that's okay. The others are only looking out for their own. But there's still something kind of nasty about how, first of all, there are many kids that nobody looks out for. Broken homes, and these natalists never mention that sort of stuff, right? Like Jordan Peterson, that fucking cunt, piece of shit, should probably suffer an accident. That, he dares to say something like, you're immature if you don't have kids, ignoring all the millions and billions and gazillions of cases where having kids is a terrible idea because you're going to be a shitty parent, or your kid's going to get cancer, it's going to have a serious disease. And it's just to blatantly say, despite all the problems in the world, some of which he supports or doesn't do anything to stop, like climate change, or to make it worse, like being a transphobe, like you have a kid, ends up being trans, which of course could happen, why not? We're learning more and more about humans, should have an open mind about it. Some people are trans. I'm pretty sure in seahorses, it's the males who have kids. The males, right? So the world is strange, get over it. But, so I should have a kid, and just so you can mistreat him because he doesn't fall into one of your pigeonholes, right? And he should burn in climate change that you refuse to admit is a serious problem, or that you refuse to use the proper solutions to it, and just keep pretending, well, yeah, we can just have oil and all that kind of stuff forever. Or you don't want to know anything about the economy because, well, if we help people and if we help students in school get a nicer, more progressive approach, then they're not gonna be able to hold frame in the world, which of course is a stupid reflexive circular argument because you could make the economy better for people. But he doesn't want to do that because he's kind of an extreme, neo-reactionary, neoliberal kind of guy. So I should have a kid so you can torture him, basically, right? And even these delusions of these people still live on delusions, right? Like that there's some fucking god who made the universe, which I've tried to talk about religion in a more sophisticated way, but in the end, all I ever come back to is just how can you be that fucking stupid? You know, I mean, we're so far away from having any rational society to live in, where billions and billions of people still believe in fairy tales, and they can't even come together on the most basic facts, like that if there's a disease that will kill people, you should get vaccinated for it. What the fuck is the point then? Right? You could say, what the fuck is the point? So, shitty nest. Another point from your Mendem. Shitty fucking nest. And these people don't want to fix the nest. They just want to apply these simplistic little solutions. As if the world was simple. But it's basically unfixable. You fix a problem, it's like whack-a-mole, right? Whack one, another one comes up. Whack one, another one comes up, or like pimples, which I've had for forever, It's another problem that fucked up my face. Probably can't see it. Probably can't see it much from here, but it really did fuck it up. All these problems, loneliness, typical young guy problem. If you're not a normal guy or a girl, you're fucked. And all they can tell you is, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. Too bad, that's life. So they use some fucking wisdom to try to justify it, or some bullshit, right? Sad. I just feel sorry for people. And people like us who feel sorry for people are the ones who are usually cast off as crazy or too depressed or whatever the fuck. But you can be very depressed and be on benzos, like Jeterson, and still pretend it's okay, right? So that's not much of an argument. I mean, many of them, you can either be positive or negative, but you could still be very dangerous, right? There's nothing about negativity or pessimism that says you're gonna be more or less dangerous, really. You could give a more, prep speech, and it could be not dangerous, or it could be dangerous, or you could give a suicide speech and be dangerous and not dangerous, right? You just don't know. It's not that simple. So I have more. Japan. I have like a shit ton of notes. Most of humanity's greatest moments may be behind it. Best comedians are either dead or are past their prime. Again, much of the same. I mean, even something like YouTube comes to mind. That YouTube favors. If you want to get views on YouTube, I know how to do it. At least if you make rant videos like this, you gotta upload about 2 or 3 times a week. Every 2 or 3 days, you gotta upload like a 10-minute video. Because YouTube likes consistency, simplicity, shortness, brevity. Because people are lazy and stupid and they can't pay attention. And they want to ingest the stuff short form. That's why they like fast food. Right? Fast delivery. Fast food, fast delivery, and fast transportation. That's the quip I came up with at some point. The Carlinian quip. But anyway, so if you want to make content like mine, where you feel like talking because you accumulate a bunch of thoughts in your head, and you feel like talking once every month, you're not gonna get many views probably, because that's not what you do once. It's not what the people want. And in some sense, I understand them because it's very exhausting to live. But it just says something about how sad everything is. That really is that the best we can do. Watch dumb short form content. See, I don't know if this ship is gonna be loud, so I'm probably just gonna take a break and then come back. Yeah, so in the break, I was reminded of another point I made before. In the video I started, but I was too depressed to finish. Happens. It's really difficult to make anything when you're depressed. But I made these 2 points that society doesn't know what it misses. What I meant by that was that if society tells you, well, you can't be an artist, you can't be a musician, you can't be a writer, you can't be any of that because we need you to make money, otherwise you'll be homeless. It doesn't know the myriad of talent that it throws out the window. I mean, how many talented people are there? There are many, really. Don't lie, you know it. You've been on YouTube, you've been on TikTok or whatever, and you've seen plenty of talented people around. So a lot of those people might come out of the woodworks or produce more content if they were allowed to do it. But they have to go to work so they can do it. Right? So one kind of argument you can make against this kind of economic authoritarianism or societal authoritarianism, that it knows best, is just this idea that not all the variables are known. Society doesn't know all the great people that it has thrown out. And so that's another fault that society has, especially in modern days, where it's very much just about looking out for your own survival and making money. It doesn't give you a lot of initiative to try and fail safely. It is much less of a society than it used to be, right? And another point is that society always tries to minimize complexity, like a programmer, right? A programmer always wants to simplify things. It wants to create code that runs on the fewest amount of computations possible, right? It doesn't want to. It tries to find an elegant solution. And so, but just because something is simple, and just because something works, doesn't mean that it's good, right? So, this addiction to efficiency, there is a problem with that thought. There's a problem with that norm, because efficiency is loosely defined, and can be and should be outgrown by considerations of art and beauty and love and things like that. Otherwise, what the fuck is the point of having a society? I just don't really see the point of a society of pure efficiency, right? And yeah, another point is that I made before is that society doesn't see what society only rewards what it sees, but it doesn't reward what it doesn't see, right? So you might look at a guy and you might say, "Oh, that guy is useless. He's not doing much of anything." But that's precisely why he's so fucking good, because many people that do things just fuck things up, right? They pollute the environment, they berate people, they cheat on people, right? They have 7 boyfriends or 7 girlfriends. By the way, I made a video a couple videos back where I was a little bit too irate. I went a little too far in places, but I had a mental breakdown. So I don't know how to rectify that. But yeah, I went a little too far. I said the N word. It was to make a point, but I also went a little too hard on women, I feel. But it was because of some personal turmoil. I'm trying to be fair-minded. Anyway. Right, so you can see all these. The point is to just point out all these fallacies and problems in society that that don't measure yourself against the yardstick of society. Because society is retarded. It is not a rational agent. It doesn't consider all the relevant variables, the variables that should be considered. Have some leniency on yourself. You're almost certainly not as bad as you think you are. But anyway, back to these notes. I have so many. Yeah, hopefully, if this, I hope somebody's enjoying watching this shit. If you eat enough chips in the meantime, I like nachos and cheese dip. Then that might give you something to do. Japan. Back to the notes. Yeah, I mean, Japan is past its glory days, right? It used to be it's one of the most unique, brilliant cultures ever. But today it's dying in terms of population, and yeah, the people in it are not nearly as glorious as they used to be, right? They've been westernized. And in the video where I had the mental breakdown, I said that, you know, Americans are like bugs compared to the average Japanese. I shouldn't have used this. I shouldn't have said that, but it's just that Japan has been westernized, and the people in it are just kind of. They still maintain their poise. They're still pretty, from what I've seen online, they're still pretty sophisticated and well groomed and all that kind of stuff. Not as loud, right? But again, it's just not clear that the so-called progress that the West has given them has done them much good. It just looks like a country in decline, where people are just again just consuming, working, and dying, right? And many people are either hikikomori or they're karoshi. They die of overwork, right? A very toxic work culture. It's definitely past its glory, right? So, yeah, most of humanity's greatest moments may be behind it. Yeah, it's just that against this idea of linear progress, that why do we presume that the greatest ideas haven't already been thought of and the greatest inventions haven't already been invented? Like, I don't know. It's not the greatest invention, but things that come to mind is like the Rubik's Cube. or I don't know, a dam or something. Magnificent creations, but what makes you think we're gonna? What else can we do that will top those things? We're gonna make a 16-faced Rubik's cube. I don't know. We already have like huge Rubik's cubes that are weirdly shaped, but that's pretty much all we can do at this point, right? That just goes back to the pessimism that that's pretty much all you can do. Pretty much all you can do is increase the size. So you have a Snickers bar. Now you walk into a store and there's two Snickers bars in one package. That's all. That's the progress, right? We used to have these fat analog TVs. Now we have LED flat screen TVs. But all they can do is be flat. Double dip, triple dip. And this all goes back to the kind of the fitness argument. People complain about people being unfit like me. And yeah, I mean, I haven't researched this much, but apparently there are fucking carcinogens in everything you eat. There's some poisonous fucking shit in everything you eat. It's almost insane to believe that this is progress, right? Especially when you consider the numbers. But I'm not gonna repeat that argument. I know I made that in the first day of this video. So yeah, what about these ancient fucking aliens or something? I'm sort of joking. I don't know if I have no idea if those conspiracies are true. But in a way, how the fuck would we know? Evidence could have been destroyed. So, we may have, human beings may have been much more ingenious in previous civilizations that have disappeared and have left no traces than we ever could be. So, we may just be degenerating. And yes, it's really difficult to see if there's progress, where the progress is going. I mean, what could you possibly even do other than make double chip chips, the double chip chocolates? Best comedians are either dead or are past their prime. So I'm just picking examples of this that I see. Best comedians, Louis C.K., very funny. George Carlin, he's dead. But the new comedians, they are just not that great. Norm Macdonald, I really liked him. But he's dead. So, there are some good ones, there are some funny ones. But they don't seem nearly as good. And maybe you could apply this to artists. I mean, do we have something like a Michelangelo today working? One of, I don't know, a Kentaro Miura or something like that. Somebody like that in terms of manga. I don't know. They don't seem all that. They don't seem all that ubiquitous, the geniuses. And with today's culture, it's even more difficult to be a genius. Because, again, take somebody like Bukowski, if you know Bukowski. If you know anything about him, you know he was a dirty old man. A nasty guy, kind of a misogynist, blah blah blah. Dazai, my favorite novelist. But, in a sense, greatness means to be fucked up. Pretty well all great men and women, but I'm not gonna bullshit you. In the past, most great people were men for, I guess, sociological reasons, historical reasons. I think more great women are coming out today that, couldn't have been there hundreds of years ago because they couldn't have led. like the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, whatever. Yeah, it just there's some very genius women out there. That's not denied. And yeah, we just don't know if it's a biological thing or it's just the environment. But you just couldn't know for the argument that I made before. But anyway, we couldn't have somebody like Bukowski or Dazai today because they would be cancelled, right? Just read the Goodreads pages, the reviews of the books, misogyny, misogyny. But the reason why I was so mean to women in that video where I had a mental breakdown, which is not an excuse. I'm just saying I had a mental breakdown. I take responsibility for everything, otherwise I would have deleted it. I said like, but you still like them, right? And I'm not making this shit up. I saw the comments, right? The women all over the fucking comments saying, I would fuck her. I mean, you know, if I saw him, I would fuck him. And it's like, even though he was a raging misogynist and a beast, you would still do it. You would still fuck him. So don't pretend that you like these nice little boys. You don't. You probably don't. That's all I was trying to say. That, you know, we have kind of deluded ourselves into believing that being nice and polite and coy, which is really just cowardice when you think about it. Every anxious person knows the only reason you're nice to people. And most of the time, I don't know what this is under my eye. I'm sorry. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Can I get it off? Can I get it off? I don't think so. Anyway, the only reason why you're nice to people is because you're afraid of them. Right? I'd be rude most of the time. And it gives you a sense of freedom to be rude. You know you just want to be rude. But your anxiety tells you you can't. So for us anxious people, niceness is not really goodness. It's just a self-defense mechanism. And so, from my perspective, it's very easy to see that being nice or polite or using polite words doesn't have anything to do with goodness. Actually, it's probably the opposite. And so I hate our modern society where you can be offensive, because I just see it as assholes pretending they're not assholes. And so to tie it back to the argument, you do need assholes to be great. Great people, incredible writers, poets, whatever, they're usually not nice people. Because if they were nice, they would have nothing interesting to say. And no interesting way of saying it. So that might be a pill that we have to swallow. And so society presses these people down. They tell them, you're not allowed to be great. You're cancelled. Right? Maybe even you're jailed. Right? But isn't there some genius in some lunatic running around naked or drunk? Why is he jailed? Just let him be. It's art. Society is a bunch of pussies pretending to be good people. Oh my goodness, I have so many more. K selection versus R selection, breeding paradox. Breeding as in, you know, having kids. Not in the sense of breathing oxygen. That's something that I've also said before, but I wanted to rehash. That it seems to me that dumber animals have more kids. And that's our selection. They're of course fast breeders. So like a bug will have many kids. K selection, That's a kind of process where animals that are smarter have fewer kids but take better care of them. And this can be applied to humans. And since I made that argument, I discovered there was some racist guy who applied this to human races. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that at all. It's retarded. But it is perfectly clear that there is a correlation between intelligence and having kids. That is, the dumber you are, the more kids you have. Perfectly clear. People with more education who live in richer, more educated countries have less kids, like Southeast, like in the Far East, Hong Kong, South Korea, and so on. They have like a crazy low level of fertility, whereas in uneducated countries you have like 4, 5, 6 kids. And so there is a clear paradox that the more competent you are in lots of ways, the less kids you have, and the less competent you are, the more kids you have. So that's another one of these perilous paradoxes or noxious paradoxes that I was mentioning earlier, that you're either sedated or you're anxious. You either get laid a lot or you're really smart. The middle road, there might be a middle road. That's what people usually say. There's a middle road for everything. But that to me is just a nice little cope. Oh, the middle fucking road. There's no middle road. I mean, you either have something or you don't. The middle road is just a different way of measuring either or, in my opinion. Just a nice cope, right? And certainly, again, where's the middle road in something like being burned to death and having an erection, Many times you will be thrown into a situation where there will not be any kind of middle road. So fuck that cope too, middle road. Nature versus nurture, retroactive causation. The forest example. That's a nice one. Yeah, I already talked about nature versus nurture. That was the beginning. Retroactive causation, I already talked about it. So basically just like, if you look at a forest, and you look at the trees in the forest, right? You can easily say that those trees are genetic. You can explain the genetic causation. But how thick they're gonna grow, how tall they're gonna grow, or how long they're gonna live, that's all gonna be determined by the environment. How much sunlight they will get, how much water they will get. If there's a lumberjack that will cut them down, a beaver that will cut them down, the quality of the soil, that will all be determined by the environment. And so it seems to me that it's really the environment that does the determining and not the genetics. There may have been genetic determinism at first, kind of like a chicken versus egg scenario. But in some sense, it's at some point it turned back. And, it was the chicken that came first and not the egg. So that's basically a kind of, I'm a scientific anti-realist, if you know what that means. Anti-realism, flux of perception, abandoned house analogy. Yeah, if you go by an abandoned house, different kinds of people will see it in many different kinds of ways, right? If you're a group of teenagers having fun on a Friday night, it's a fancy fun time. It's fancy fun time. It's a ghost hunt, right? You'll be scared. If you're a homeless guy, somebody who's looking for an abode for the night, just crash the night. You don't give a fuck about ghosts or any of that. You just see it as a temporary residence. If you are a financial real estate developer, you see it as money. You see it as capital. So you don't see it as a house to live in. You don't see it as a ghostly adventure. You don't give a fuck about any of that. You see it as money investment. And if you're the workers, that the contractors that are contracted out to make to fix up the place, they see it as a job, a series of jobs. It's not a ghostly adventure to them. It's not a temporary residence. It's not money. It's not a lot of money. It's not investment. It's just ladders and fucking measuring tapes and bricks and so on. So everybody sees the abandoned house a little bit differently. And so, again, you can even see it in colorblind people, deaf people, blind people, people with schizophrenia, depression. Everybody sees the world a little bit differently. And so it's not possible to grasp the world objectively as it is, because in some sense it is not as it is. And so it seems to me impossible to formalize the world in a kind of objective way without messing it up, right? Without muddling it up, diluting it with perception, which is then subjectifies reality. So there is a flux of perception. This goes back to philosophers like Heraclitus, that you never step into the same river twice, because it always moves. And I have a video where I talk about this idea that change only occurs on the surface. There are ripples on the surface of the water, but deep down below it's the water, right? So in some sense there's change, but on an underlying level it's the same stuff. So there's a kind of paradox that the world is one and it's also moving at the same time. But I'm still trying to work this out. It's difficult to figure this stuff out. Yeah, I should have mentioned the next one, because I have notes all like they're not categorized. But yeah, I mean, there's this idea of South Korea age trick. Because I saw an article once where that South Korea has like an aging system where you get 1 year, like when you're one, you're already two, something like that. I think, right? They add 1 year. And so the way they were trying to mitigate the aging problem is by meddling with this system. So if you had, so previously if you reached the retirement age, they pushed that back 1 year or something like that, because if the retirement age is, let's say, 65 on the Korean system, then what they did, then you can retire. But if they push it back 1 year, they take away the Korean aging system and push it back to the regular one, then you're only 64. So you have another year of work before you get to retire. So, this is just a funny example of people meddling with reality in a funny way. Blaming the youth, confiscating phones is a sign of failure. Again, I'm back to the social issues, but let me take a break. I'm thirsty. Yeah, so the blaming the youth is another thing that I've seen happening, because I've seen recently the health minister of my country, I think he was blaming nurses, right? The reason why the healthcare system sucks, which it does, is a piece of shit, you could probably relate, is because the nurses don't want to be nurses. And it's like, Well, why do you think they don't want to be nurses? Maybe because it sucks. Maybe because the pay is low. Maybe because the environment sucks. That might have something to do with it, but no, no, it's the blaming the youth is always happens, right? Like one example is confiscating phones. That's what I said. Confiscating phones is a sign of failure. Yeah, I mean, in my country, I think they now have a rule where you have to confiscate all phones for the class or something like that. Something stupid. It's like, well, haven't you thought about the fact that maybe if your class was of any use, then you wouldn't need to confiscate the phones so kids would want to listen. If your class is so useless, they don't want to listen. What the fuck is the point? I mean, if I had been in school, when I was investing in crypto, I made money, but I needed to check my crypto often to make money. And I was an adult at the time, but suppose I'd been 15. Do you really want me to lose $1,000 or $10,000 because I need to pay attention to some useless pile of crap that's being written on the whiteboard? Really? Right? Just absurd. I mean, we live in an age where the kid being on his phone is probably more useful than listening to the class. Because the class is just some rote learning bullshit crap. Whereas the kid could be learning how to edit videos, how to trade crypto, how to make it on YouTube, how to save money. Could be learning all kinds of shit that you need to survive on this planet. But much of that stuff, they're not gonna teach you, or they're gonna teach you in such a boring way that nobody will want to listen to it. Right? So imagine how much potential has been wasted because teachers are boring. I mean, when I was in school, god damn. Yeah, one teacher was in night school. All she did, she would just show up and just start writing. She would just start. It was doing right. She was just speaking. I think she was even too lazy to write things on the blackboard. She was just dictating, right? And what do you call it in the U.S. popcorn call, where everybody has to read? It wasn't that, but she was reading, and we had to jot it down what she was saying. And that was the most boring, useless waste of time anybody has ever seen. I could have been doing anything more important than that bullshit. Writing down a bunch of information about biology that nobody could possibly remember because it was too boring. You need to present it in a way that's fun and digestible. You need to go out in nature. And you have to look at the bugs and things like that. Actually, one teacher did that once. But you need teachers that actually care. They're really into science if they want to teach science. But they don't. They're not into it. They're just there for a paycheck. That bitch was like 67. She was there only. She had no passion. Of course, maybe she would give us this story like, I'm here because I love to educate. And you are ungrateful pieces of crap. Something like that was going on. It's like, you're only here for a paycheck. Right? And I could understand that, but fuck you, too. Like if I can understand that, then you can understand that I don't like your bullshit way of teaching. Right? So, confiscating phones is a sign of failure. Blaming children is always a sign of failure. Nothing is ever the child's fault, you fucking idiots. You raise them in an environment that makes all the difference. That should be obvious, you fucking cunts. Motherfucker. So I actually have a section from Mainichi.Japan. Listen to this. Elementary and junior high school students in Japan were absent from school for 30 days or more in record numbers due to factors besides illness and finances, an education ministry survey has found. The number of students categorized as truant in the 2022 school year survey reached 299,048, an increase of 54,108 or 22.1% from the year prior. The Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science and Technology survey on problematic behavior and truancy at national and other public schools and private institutions nationwide also found a record-breaking 681,948 bullying cases in elementary, junior and senior high and special needs schools. Lethargy and anxiety were together chosen as the most common factor for refusing to attend school at 51.8%, followed by disrupted daily rhythm, playing and delinquency at 11.4%, and trouble between friends at 9.2%. And I leave a link, maybe I'll put it in the description, mainichi.gp. So did you listen to that? 600,000 cases of bullying, record numbers of delinquency, that sort of crap. There's an epidemic. Why? Good question. But it might have something to do with all the stuff that we've been talking about previously. That society is sort of breaking up in a way. That there's nothing holding them together. That the education system sucks. That the economy sucks. That there are carcinogens in foods that destroy you. That the culture is toxic. That the children are being blamed, especially in an Asian culture like Japan. I don't know. That's it's just something that I jotted down because it just hurts to see. I mean, I was bullied. Practically everyone was bullied in a way, more or less. But I guess it's just another example of seeing the madness of society, the amount of terrible things that happen. So why bother having kids? Just don't do it. That's the only thought that comes into my head. It's just so sad that from the outside you might see videos from Japan that say, it's so nice, so nice. They're not showing you the bad side. I mean, I've seen some Korean TV shows, they're much better at showing you the bad side. Like, it was some zombie. I really like that one for some reason. Something about We Are Dead or something. That's not the title, but something like that. I like that one. They're a lot more. They seem to be pretty honest about those problems. I feel like in Japan you get a lot more pretension of the issues. Yeah. Nothing fun to say. But there's another ship. It's probably gonna be fairly loud. So I realize this is gonna be very long, this video. I think we're already like an hour and a half, but I wanted to make this video, I wanted to make its title be a complete refutation of the world. So that should take some time. And of course it cannot be complete. A little bit of an exaggeration, but oh fucking well. I found the notes piece of note that I really like. The bottom it says, if you're not likely to be unlucky, you're also not likely to be lucky. Right? So let's read that again. If you're not likely to be unlucky, so you're probably not unlucky, you're also not likely to be lucky, so you're probably not lucky. Right? So I guess what I really meant to say there is that, you know, really unlucky, right? So if you're probably not going to suffer a really bad fate, then why are you expecting to enjoy a really good one? And you can scale it down and you can say, well, I'm okay, I'm alright, I might be unlucky in some sense, but I'm doing okay, fairly okay. But you still believe that amazing things are gonna come to you, right? So there's a kind of asymmetry in your cognition. It's a kind of a cognitive fallacy or mistake or bias where you're more privy to the good things than the bad things. And I think that seems to be a piece of evidence for that in the way that our minds work. But I've heard the opposite. I've heard people say that you actually remember the bad stuff more than the good stuff. I don't know. I don't know what the average on that is. It certainly depends on whether you're depressive or not. That's for sure. But it seems to be, I think people when they wake up, they usually think they're gonna have it good, even if they're gonna have it bad. Or they will put a positive spin on it, like, oh well, at least I'm still alive, right? That's one cope that has gone through my head before, that the YouTuber Too Mad died when he was 23 of an overdose. And I'm like, well, I might be fucked up, but at least I'm alive. And I'm not even sure that's a good thing for me. Because as a depressed guy, I sometimes think, I want to go home. I want to die. I don't want to do this shit. Yeah. So I have another quote here that says, with greatness comes great danger. Like, again, I struggle to make this, but you have a race like or ethnicity like Jews, and you're like, well, some of them are bankers and they make Hollywood movies and there's a lot of control. But that's in a way a proof of their greatness too. Like, if you have greatness, you have danger, right? So if Jews, and obviously I'm using the racist logic against them. I wouldn't use this myself, but it's like, well, if the Jews are so bad, well, they're pretty fucking great because they maintain a system like capitalism, which is comparatively much more brilliant than the rest, let's be honest, by all available evidence. So yes, if you have a billion people with high levels of education, intelligence, they might just make an Israel, just the way it is. So with greatness comes great danger. I'm sorry to say, that was the creepiest point I made, but well, I'm seeing myself double. Yeah, I got scared. I thought someone was watching me. Another point to the addiction bit, back to the antinatalism. You don't stop tweeting when you reach X number of followers. Imperfection of life. Yeah, it's just the point about the antinatalist stuff of why, or the progress stuff. What's the point of progressing when you can reach 100,000 subscribers and all you can think is, I need another 100,000, right? When the YouTuber I Show Speed, reaches a milestone, which I sometimes watch, I admit it, guilty pleasure. It's really stupid, but funny. It's kind of fucked up, the kind of stuff that we all watch but don't admit, right? You're really watching that shit? Anyway, he just wants more. 26 million when we need 27. 28, we need 29. Mr. Beast, a more awful example. I gave away, I made a game show of 10 million, let's have a game show of 20 million. This stuff never culminates anywhere, I think, excepting in a burn and a crash. Eventually the bubble bursts, that's how the market works. The bubble bursts, everything is over. So why be an optimist? What are you being an optimist towards? Like even if you could have and here we're coming to religion, AI, gods, and perfections, it would still be pointless. What's the point? You just have double cakes? Forget about it. But of course, we're not gonna get there. It's not gonna be perfect no matter what you do. I here again agree with Emendem that the imperfection has to be implicit in life. Many philosophers have said this, and it's true. There's no information sensitivity without sensory experience. You can't just press a button and say, I need to eat. If you're not hungry, you're just gonna ignore it. It's just, human beings are not rational. It's just a retarded argument by people like David Pierce. Just retarded. It's stupid. Like a machine, you can't just say to a machine, do it. Yeah, a machine does it because you program it. But the human being, why would I do it unless there's a feeling I want to satisfy? Like, there's probably some fucking example I can give here. Like, again, it's just somebody tells you, don't fuck your life up, you're gonna regret it. Old people say this all the time. They're correct, but you don't feel it when you're young, so you don't give a fuck about what they have to say. And then you fuck yourself up, and then you know what you lost. The negativity is always implicit in the function. Whatever nerdy way you want to put it. There's an implication, etc., and so on and so on. And you're always fending for yourself, and you're always selfish, and you're always nepotistic. How the fuck are you gonna change any of that shit? So that goes to the idea. Another thing I have written up is spiritual bullshit is no evidence of enlightenment. It's that guy, Russell Brand. He used to be this, I guess, lefty spiritual guy, and now he turned into a kind of right-wing conspiracy nut. So even though he uses all this spiritual lovey-dovey bullshit, he's still just a fucking idiot, spreading nonsense. So spiritual bullshit is no evidence of enlightenment. It can be just a mask of a problem, right? You smoke your dope, take your Xanax, Prozac, acid, whatever the fuck you do. And it's a good way of ignoring reality. But then you get addicted, and the withdrawal, the come down is gonna be worse than anything you've ever experienced in your fucking life. Right? It's bullshit. And it's bad for you, like Carlin said. So again, I have things like written up here. COVID, the great IQ test. We did need the great reset. Yeah, it was an IQ test. The fucking retards came out of the woodworks and said, it causes autism, it's bad. Of course, it's just a delusion. It's just a mass delusion. And we did need the great reset. Yes, it's a perfectly appropriately titled book name by that evil dude. I don't say he's not evil, but society does need a kind of great reminder, like in AOT. the endless cycle of hate. Again, history. We did need a great reminder that it's not our glory, that you're gonna get fucked in the end. So be careful, right? And yeah, I mean, this capitalist conspiracy, right? These conspiracies, I don't know how there's a conspiracy. It's already been that way. It's always been that way. Of course, the people who run the world want to destroy you and control you. It's called society. It's called capitalism. Nothing to disagree. Just don't pretend it's somehow the liberals' fault. It's retarded, right? It's like I made the argument. You're gonna eat the bugs. You're gonna live in a pod. You will own nothing. This is already happening. You don't need some kind of fucking plot. It's just the consequence of our economic system. You already eat like shit. You already eat carcinogens. You already eat stuff that has more sugar than uh, a horse can eat. And you think you're doing something because you're manly. You eat beef and you think you're manly, and it's killing you. You people are so fucking stupid. Not you per se, but yeah, I mean, of course, it's just all the idiots. Maybe the vaccine is poison, but it's like, why is it that all the fucking idiots believe it and none of the smart people do? That's the that's why for me the ad hominem argument works. Just look at the people making the argument, use the brain. You'll probably be correct, right? Or the religious nuts who believe this stuff. Oh, you're probably wrong, right? Just like they're wrong about all the other stuff, witches, the witches and ghosts and demons and shit. They're probably wrong about this too. So a little bit of woke stuff. Some of you won't like it. Fuck you then. I'm just being honest, right? If you think it's too woke, just look at some of my previous stuff. Message to a dishonest world is really anti-woke. All crimes are so obvious there's no point in having a theory of them. So I think that's just a point against the so-called white people. Again, I'm only using the word against racists. That you have these theories, oh, the blacks are doing this, the Jews. What about white people? In Belgium, they killed anywhere from, I think, 1 million, and I think it's a range of like 1.5 million to like 13 million or something like that. Huge range, right? I don't know exactly what the range is, but I think it's somewhere between 1.2 million to 12, 13 million. They slaughtered all those black people in the Congo. And Belgium has like a population of 10 million people. So that's like if India killed 1.4 billion people, right? But nobody goes around saying, oh, this fucking white genocidal freaks. And that's because our crimes are so obvious, there's no point of having a conspiracy of them. The reason why you gotta have conspiracies and little racist remarks against black people 1350 is because our crimes as white people is so obvious that you don't gotta even mention it. It's perfectly clear. It's the norm. We're the norm. What we do when we exploit and enslave and destroy is the norm. And that goes to the DEI point that I also have. I'm jumping a little bit, but the DEI is racist. The self-admitted weakness of racists. So DEI is this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and Kamala Harris is supposed to be. Some people say this. She's only the president-elect because she's black and Indian, so that's why she's here. Some people have said, yeah, of course. It's like, even if that's true, that only goes to expose the racism of the U.S., right? Because if the U.S. wasn't racist, if the U.S. culture was not racist, it would be nothing out of the ordinary for an Indian black woman to become the president. In fact, it's sexist too. It's not just racist. So she may well be a DEI pick. Why not? but that's only because our country is so sexist and racist. It is impossible. It's an it's a anathema. It's a fucking the great magic that somebody like that would become the president elect. A kerfluffle. I don't know what the fuck the word is. Yeah, that's the only reason. The self-admitted weakness of races. Yeah, it's this theory of white supremacist, white nationalism and stuff like that, or any other, not just white. It could be Asian, black. I don't give a fuck. You're just basically saying your race is so weak, you're so stupid and so weak that you cannot do with other people living in your country. You need special little protections, right? So there's another term connected to this sort of stuff, which is called affirmative action. It's like, well, the affirmative action began with white men, then it was extended to everyone else. So again, it's the white men again. They're the ones who had the most, and then it was extended to others. Of course, it's not everywhere in the world. Some, I'm drawing the lines sharply. I'm talking about the West mostly. Of course, in Japan, it was the Japanese who ruled, blah, blah, blah. But you know what I mean. There's always going to be, whatever your theory is about what the Jews are doing or whatever, there's always going to be hypocrisy there. Just admit your own crimes first. Before you make your bed, before you criticize others. Bucko. Yeah, this video is getting really long. Really long. But I still want to make it. Peterson attacks postmodernists for science denial, but the right does it the most. Again, that's pretty obvious. I already explained that one. The postmodernists are anti-scientific, anti-realists. They don't think that science can give you objectivity, usually. That's the theory, which, again, I believe. I think science is just a method of describing the world, but doesn't give you a perfect access, complete access to the world. And Peterson hates this sort of stuff. But he's the one who does the most science denial. It's not the postmodernists who say climate change is not that big of a deal. It's precisely people like him who criticize postmodernism. It's a pretty easy point. Back to religion. Religion only gives you the form and not the content of value. Camps at the border. No free lunch for poor kids by the party of family values. Christianity, still there was slavery. So this is just a general point, I think, that I already mentioned the point about Republicans there. But I think this is just a general point that this argument that religion gives you morality. Well, I think it only gives you the form of a morality. It gives you in the form of a tablet. 10 Commandments, do it. That's fine, but that doesn't actually give it to you. You actually have to reach out and get it. And the atheist is also within his right to do that. Right? So the difference between the atheist and the religious person in terms of morality is not really the content of morality, but the form or the framework of where it comes from, the source. But the source doesn't really matter. In fact, the source is appealing to the source to refute an argument is actually an argumentative fallacy. Right? You can't just say, well, it comes from Hitler planted trees, so planting trees is bad. You can't say that. And so it really is a fallacious argument to say that religion gives you morality. And certainly in terms of the empirics of it, everybody knows that religion has done a lot of terrible violence. And does it make the world a better place? Well, I think an easy you know, a general sweep of the situation, a general outlook at the situation will tell you no. And today, its most obvious form is Islam, and then Christianity. They are the most dangerous ones. But in countries where religion is not as important or that are secular, they seem a lot more safe and sound. But this is all complicated. I mean, religious countries also have more kids. You know, they tend to be bigger and stronger too. You know, so it's again, it depends on what you want to accomplish. But I'm really too tired to get into that now. The point is that I don't think it gives you morals. I think it gives you the form of morals. And certainly, less religious countries seem a lot more decent to live in. No free lunch for poor kids. Yes, again, the party of Christianity. Camps at the border. Again, putting children in cages. Trump. There was actually a Republican thing called Jeff Sessions who used the Bible as a justification. That, you know, we are the good guys, blah, blah, blah. So Christianity is still there was slavery, right? I mean, if you want to say that something like the US or the West has Christian fundamentals, which it does, I guess, it still didn't stop slavery from happening. It didn't stop, like, no matter how Christian the country was, there was still slavery, there was still segregation, there was still genocide, and so on and so forth. And so, again, it just doesn't seem religion does all that much to save the world. Might do a lot to fuck it up. And again, what is saving the world? I mean, if you're antinatalist, you don't want to save it. You want to get rid of it. And some antinatalists would say, build a button, blow it up. But most of them would say, just don't procreate, right? I mean, there's this big red button scenario, but it's basically just a straw man. It's not going to be built. There's no big red button. Nobody's the big red button is in the hands of people who want to live. They want to protect their own country. Like Hitler was a great natalist. Like, Peterson used the argument against Benatar in their debate that, well, it's pernicious. It's like, you know, because the Nazis used what he called antinatalist arguments to euthanize people. But in a way, you know, Hitler was a huge natalist. I mean, but he was only a natalist for his own people, right? He was picky about his natalism, right? You know, whatever the word is, selectively natalist. And so you can easily apply the term natalism to him too. Not just that he was an antinatalist. I mean, an antinatalist wouldn't do that, but an extreme natalist might do what Hitler did. An antinatalist wouldn't be a Hitler. I guess he could be a genocidal freak, but I don't think you have too many examples of that in the world. Usually people kill and murder, not for antinatalist reasons, but for some political or religious reasons. Is this everything I cover? We should be going towards the end now. I'm really tired. While for the individual laws and norms are sacred and objective, for society they are wholly contingent. While for the individual laws and norms are sacred and objective, for society they are wholly contingent. This is a paradox that is very interesting, for you experience all the norms and laws of society, the mores of society, its morality, shibboleths, whatever the fuck the words are, as objective. That, you know, especially as a kid, when you do something wrong as a kid, at least if you were me, you were a scaredy kid, you're like, oh God, I did something awful. And it's like, You didn't really do anything awful. It's only in your eyes, in your mind. In terms of society, it's completely contingent. Society could see the same thing as either bad or good, depending on what it is. But the individual always experiences it as objective and holy. So it's really society that's the culprit. Society is the one that makes objectivity, which is not really objectivity. I've talked about this several times in older videos. The problem of scalability. Yeah, I just think that's a problem that how do you define your terms, right? Because if you say something like black people, and you say 13-50%, the crime statistics that trolls like to use, it's like, well, yeah, but it's not really the 75-year-old black lady who's doing it or the 10-year-old child. It's probably the men between the ages of 18 and 40 mostly, or something like that, right? So it's the problem of scalability looms large. Do you avoid the autistic ones? Do you avoid the disabled ones? How you pigeonhole people will beg the question of how you judge those people. And there really is no objective or really rational way, for the most part, of deciding where you put your threshold and where you end and where you begin the range. So I think that's an interesting problem. I think we have like one more and then we can get the... Oh no, we have two more. Let's just get it out. AI is trained on human data. It is partly human. Every tool and theory is partly human because humans made it. So yeah, I guess that's just another point that it's impossible to separate the machine or the theory or the mathematics or the science from the human, right? The things that we make are a succession of our own capacities. We made the abacus, and then we made calculators and Rubik's cubes and AI and so on. So, and of course, the theory is that we're gonna be replaced by machines at some point, and maybe we will be, because, in a sense, we have been replacing our natural parts with machinic parts for a long time. Like, I don't think people used to use insoles for their flat foot or glasses or any of that shit, and they were doing just fine. Probably because they died early, but that's just as well, in my opinion. I'm a bit of a primitivist. Society fucked me up. And I admit it. I hate it. So yeah, a little bit tired to get into that now. Let's just do one more, and that's the last one, by the way. I'm not just bailing out. Self-fulfilling prophecy. Gerbert Johnson, stupid porn, Ted Bundy connection. Repression of sexual desire might result in worse results. Catholic Church example. So I was watching this video by this guy called Gerbert Johnson, and he's very anti-porn, and kind of neo-reactionary young guy, which is whatever. I don't give a fuck. Go ahead. I don't like... We're fucked anyway. The left is fucked too, so I don't particularly care as long as you're honest and you don't want to hurt people. But yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make here is that he used this fucking Ted Bundy, the serial killer, rapist Ted Bundy, to connect it to porn addiction, because Ted Bundy was talking about how, well, porn is greatly dangerous, and maybe that's the reason why I did it, or maybe that's part of the reason why I did it. And so he was linking that to porn, and I just find it a little bit too ridiculous. You don't become a serial rapist murderer because of porn. That sounds a little bit ridiculous. It could happen, but could happen in the same way that if your father, I don't know, looks at you the wrong way when you're 7, you could shoot him in the head. I don't know. It's just silly. It's a little bit silly. So I didn't like that. But yeah, I guess self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's just finish this. That repression of sexual desire might result in worse results. Catholic Church example. So why do these priests molest kids? Well, probably because they're told they're not allowed to engage in sexual activity. I don't know if they can even masturbate. I don't know. But I think it's pretty obvious that a part of the reason why they were doing all that stuff or are doing all that stuff is because of the repression of the sexual desire and the system behind it, of course. But the, the repression of the sexual desire has to be there as part of the explanation. And so, if this guy is telling young men who don't get laid anyway to not watch porn, that may end up doing more harm than good. I'm not saying they're gonna go out there and do molesty things, but I'm not necessarily convinced that's the right choice. That thinking about these things in black and white is usually not a good idea. Thinking about anything in black and white is usually not a good idea. Maybe porn is exactly what we need in a lonely society where that's the only way you can get off relatively safely. So I'm not too convinced of that argument, of this easy, anti-porn argument. A self-fulfilling prophecy. I think that's just to talk about incels, that women have higher standards than they used to. I'm sure that's correct as a proposition. Um, and many of them have bought this idea that the guy they have to go out with has to be 6 foot tall, but the point I wanted to make there is that, but there's not genetically encoded per se. It's just a social contingency, so it can be fixed. So if it's true that, if these incels are correct, that the women's expectations are too high, I think, don't buy this idea that it's somehow genetically coded and it couldn't possibly be reversed. Of course, it can be, because back in the day, their expectations were probably not as high as they are now. So maybe some of their claims are true objectively, that they like pretty handsome men, blah blah blah. But let's not pretend that this cannot be modified. But I'm really tired, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Bye. Sorry, this was long.